The next two sessions are going to be by Matt Grills. Matt is a Navy veteran and a magazine managing editor. So there is not a word in the magazine that we print that Matt doesn't sweat over, honestly. He's very diligent, catches more errors than anyone could imagine. He makes the magazine, every single page, every single story better. He's been doing this for longer than I've been around. And with that, I give you Matt Grills, who will talk about interviewing techniques, and then we'll go right into tips for improving your writing. Matt, thank you for being here.
Hi, Henry. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. I hope everyone can hear me. I have not done too many of these virtual presentations. But first of all, I want to thank all of you for just attending these workshops today, and also for all that you do to help tell the American Legion story at the local level in your community, in your state. That is so important because we are an organization that's nationwide. And, while, we have a great deal of pride in the magazine and our website, what all of you do to tell the American Legion story where you are is just as important. So what I wanted to do today was just share a few things that I have learned over the past 20 years here at the American Legion and about interviewing. I started off in newspapers. I was there for a few years before I came over to the Legion magazine. So some of the things I've learned are from that time and also from the past 20 years. So I'm going to, I think, share my screen with a few slides that I've prepared. So hopefully you can hear me talking over the slide. So give me just a second to find that. Just a second. Okay. Hold on just a moment. All right. Katie, can you see that? Sorry. I thought we had this worked out yesterday, but it may take me just a second. Okay. I think that's it. So, interviewing. There are really two kinds of interviews that that you do, and the first would be news, where you're gathering information to explain an idea, an event, or a situation. Examples of this could be, say, a post fundraiser, a department fundraiser, push for, say, 100 Miles for Hope to raise money for that. So it's an event you're talking about. You could be writing a story about a local 4th of July parade and talking about your post's or department's participation in an annual event. Could be the opening of a post home, the rebuilding of a post home after a natural disaster. There's also a story that appeared on the Legion website recently about a veteran town hall that a North Carolina Post hosted about events in Afghanistan. So there can be all types of interviews that concern news. There's also what we would call a profile, where you're focusing on an individual. And it usually is related to a news peg. There's something going on, and this person is of particular importance. Perhaps you're introducing the newly elected department commander, or you are writing an article about a mayor or a governor who is a veteran. Maybe a state or US senator or representative who's introducing some veterans legislation. Or you could be interviewing a hometown hero who just returned from overseas, or a Medal of Honor recipient, a Gold Star mother. But usually there's some kind of, usually this person is in the news in some way, shape, or form. And so that's why you're talking to that person. So news and profile, those are the two types of interviews. Now, the first steps of interviewing. The first is to identify yourself. Say who you are and the organization that you are with. And I always find it helpful to give a little bit of explanation about the American Legion itself. When I'm asking to interview someone, I always I don't just say I'm with the American Legion. I say I'm with the American Legion. We're the nation's largest veterans organization. If I'm talking about the magazine, I often mention how many members we have who are readers. You could, if you are with a post or department, just again throw in that nation's largest veterans organization. If you're with a particular post and you're doing a story in your community, you might say, you know, I'm with post 123 here in the city of whatever city you're in. So, and just make it sound like you are that your post is a part of the fabric of the community. So I think that breaks down some walls there. The next thing that you want to do is explain what you are doing. You want to say, you know, I'm writing an article about this legislation, or I am writing a piece about these veterans' experiences while serving over in this area of the world. So, and the next is, of course, be transparent. Say how the interview material will be used. You know, what the quotes I'd like to get from you, I plan to put in a story about this topic. Oftentimes, the person you're interviewing may go ahead and ask, well, where will this be? You know, if you're interviewing a member of the public, asking them, you know, what their thoughts are on an event they've attended. You know, they may say, well, where can I find the story at? And just tell them, you know, where the story will be, what their quote's really for. And again, that helps break down some walls as well. You also want to be considerate of the time needed. If you are covering an event, you know, you're there and you're collecting quotes, you know, maybe you just need a couple of minutes. Just say, I'd like to just take a couple of minutes of your time. Could you tell me why you're here, what you're doing? If you are interviewing, say, an official or maybe a veteran at their home about their experiences in the military, you would ask for some time and be specific. You know, well, I think, you know, if I could have a half hour of your time, no more than an hour of your time, but really try not to make it open-ended if you can. And the last is select a good location. Avoid places with heavy background noise and distractions. Sometimes that's impossible if you are getting some quotes while you're at an event, especially if it's outside or perhaps inside an American Legion post. You know, there's going to be some noise. But if you're using a recorder, especially, that's not a great idea. So I do encourage you, if it's at all possible, especially if you're doing a sit-down interview with someone, you really need a calm environment that doesn't have a lot going on in the background. The next slide covers research. Research the person you are interviewing or the topic you're interviewing that person about ahead of time. Use Google, LinkedIn, other tools to learn more about a person's background. The internet is our friend. You will find, hopefully, just, you know, a little bit about anything that you're wanting to interview a person about, or something about that person. You can find articles about issues that if it's a topic related piece that you're writing, read all the articles you can about it, anything you can find. If it involves, you know, another organization that is connected to the story that you're writing, there's always websites that have background material and introduction. What I do want to say here, though, is don't be afraid to call ahead and ask for more information. If it's a senator's office or an organization, or even just a person that you've scheduled an interview with, if you need to know a little bit, just call ahead and say, could you send me some stuff? Just shoot me a quick email with an outline about this or that. Honestly, they'll probably be thrilled to do that, and it just makes you look like you want to be really prepared for the interview. So I encourage you, don't be afraid to make a phone call or send an email asking for a little bit of information ahead of time. Write out your questions in advance. I say here, prepare between 5 and 15 questions, as specific as possible. That doesn't mean you can't write out a whole lot more questions. You just sit down with a notepad, brainstorm, come up with as many as you can. But when you actually do the interview, I recommend between 5 and 10. Unless you're at an event where really there's just a couple of questions and you're able to get the quick quote that you need. But between 5 and 15, I think is good. As you, I'll jump ahead a little bit and just say, as you prepare these questions, edit them as well. You may find that, a couple of questions are fairly similar, and you can just scratch one off. Because they're basically asking the same thing. Or you can say combine a couple of questions into one. You want to avoid yes, no questions. Go with open-ended questions that are going to get you more quotes, more information. When you ask, say, was the event a success? Somebody who may be a little nervous about talking to a writer may just say, yep, it was a success. Okay. But you're wanting to find out more. What were they hoping to accomplish with this event? That's what you're going for. Or if you say, well, are you excited to? Well, most of the time the person is excited. But that's not really going to get you much in terms of material for writing the story. So you want to avoid yes, no questions. Also, be familiar with your questions before the interview. I'm not saying you can't have your notepad at the ready or refer to your questions, but you want to know what you're going to ask, because especially with more in-depth interviews that are sit down with a person, you're going to they may take the interview in a different direction, or give a particularly long answer. And so you're just going to want to know where you're at in the process of asking all the questions that you had in mind. Also, I'm just going to say it, don't ask dumb questions. And there are a few dumb questions, and I've given what I think are a couple of examples. I hope this doesn't seem mean or harsh, but I actually hear this on television all the time. Well, how does it feel? How did you feel to win that gold medal? How did you feel when you saw your house destroyed in a hurricane? And some questions like that just, it can come off as insensitive. Or I'm always surprised that the person who's being interviewed doesn't say, well, how do you think I felt? I felt terrible, or I felt great. You want to aim for something different. So try to avoid asking things like, how does it feel? Or did you ever dream? Well, no, a person they usually don't dream of something really great or something really bad that has happened to them. And so I try to avoid asking questions that just, to them probably seem a little odd. So your question list, the last point here on this slide, your question list is a safety net, a way to remind you what to ask. And so, but be ready to adjust or ask additional questions based on your subject's responses. This is why you need to really listen as you're interviewing. And if you're relying so much on your questions and focusing on, okay, I've asked this one, but you're not really hearing what they're saying, you could miss the opportunity to ask a really important follow-up question or to get additional details that will help with your story. Next is use a recording device. I have a canister in my desk in my office at national headquarters of audio cassette tapes from years ago. When I first started off, I carried around a little a cassette recorder. And of course, technology has changed. And, I also have just a digital voice recorder now. But lately, I've been using my iPhone and just using I think it's called, what is it? Voice memos, and just record it that way. So when I first started off in newspapers, the editor told me the first thing she was going to do was break me of using a recorder for stories. But over the years, I have found actually that I think it really helps. First of all, it helps in getting accurate quotes. Also, it's very convenient. I found that if I didn't have a recorder and I was just had a notepad and a pencil, I was so focused on trying to get an accurate quote that I wasn't really paying attention to everything else going on. And so I feel like a recorder is a good thing. And really, everyone has one in their pocket now. If you have a smartphone, you have a recorder. So I think easy, convenient, and it may save you a lot of trouble. If it's a long interview, you can. There's a lot of different transcription services or voice to text, things like that you can use to transcribe, or I go back and listen to it. Listening to it a second time helps me hear inflection, tone, things like that I think matter when it comes to quoting someone. Also, recording an interview, as I think I said this, you're focusing less on the exact quotes and more on what the person is saying. So there's just an awareness there that I think helps if you're using a recording device. So also, make it a conversation. Put the person at ease. In the end, really, you're a human talking to another human. Be sure to look the interview subject in the eyes, smile, start with small talk or an easy question. Oftentimes, you'll find that people who you may be wanting to get quotes from, they've never talked to a writer or been quoted before. They're very nervous about this. They're anxious that they might say something. They're not so much worried about what you might be quoting them as saying, as they're worried, am I going to sound dumb? They kind of get a little mixed up, aren't really sure what to, so put that person at ease. Also, give the person time to reply. First of all, when you allow for a pause or an uncomfortable silence, you often will get something even better, because that person's going to think, well, I think they're waiting for me to say a little bit more, and then they do. And also, just it's simply being polite. You're giving them time to kind of get their thoughts together. So don't rush the person. And part of this is having good facial expressions and gestures. These can either encourage or discourage your interview subject. If you look bored or suspicious, that is not going to get you the material that you want. But if you look interested, if you look fascinated, if you look curious, those things will help move the interview in the direction that you want it to go. Finally, ask the person at the end if there's anything he or she would like to add, because really they may have thought that you would ask a question that you didn't ask. So ask at the end, is there anything that you would like to add? And then ask, do you have any questions for me? I think that's helpful too, because it makes you seem more open, more accessible, and it builds a little bit more trust. It builds that relationship between you and the interview subject a little more. All right. Henry, I'll just pause here and say anything you wanted to jump in with or add?
Actually, your timing is really good, because that last point you made is one thing that I always do. And after I'm done with my questions and I get get what I want for the interview, I do ask that question, is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to tell me? And I have a handful of examples where someone has just answered my questions as we've gone through, and then once I give them that opportunity, they've told me something so important. It's completely changed the story. It's given me a new lead to the story. It was something that I didn't know, and they, the comfort level was established, and they were able to tell me that. So I think that's a great point and a great takeaway. And even if they don't say, even if they say, no, we really covered everything, you haven't lost anything just by asking that question.
Exactly. Well, I'll keep going. Not too much more here. I want to leave time for a few questions. But again, like I said before, you want to listen very carefully to the person's answers because, again, you need to be agile. You need to be ready to ask additional questions based on what you're hearing. You may find a new theme, a bigger story. Say you're interviewing some veterans who are raising money through their American Legion post for a particular cause. Well, you can simply do a story about, well, they're raising money for this for 100 miles, say. But what if you're missing the whole reason why they're doing it? Perhaps one of them had a family member who had a health crisis, and it's extremely important to them to raise money for this because they care so much about the issue of, say, obesity or wellness. And often with a fundraising, there's usually a personal reason behind it. Also, if you're interviewing someone in the auxiliary or the Sons of the American Legion, it's easy to talk about what they're doing, what they're achieving, but don't forget the reason that they're usually part of those organizations, part of the American Legion family, is because they had a veteran in their family who was very special to them. Who was that veteran? What was their connection to that veteran? That can add a lot of texture and richness to a story. So, and as I say here, an answer to one question could include an answer to another question that you were planning on asking. And so you don't want to look like you have not been paying attention if you go ahead and ask that question that they already answered. So also don't be too don't be afraid at all, actually, to ask for clarification on complex or vague answers. If it does not answer your question, if that answer doesn't really get you the information you need, ask it in a different way, or say, I'm just still not getting the information I need. Could you explain this again? Or could you clarify? Could you give me a little more? And never be afraid to read back or repeat an answer if in doubt. If you're not sure you have the quote correct, or you think you're worried that you might be misunderstanding, or perhaps that the person you're interviewing is stumbling a little bit with their words, don't be afraid to say, is what you're saying this? That helps. Few other tips. If the person you're interviewing asks to leave a comment off the record, abide by that request. Leave it off the record. Also, I highly recommend avoiding sending questions in advance. I think it's perfectly acceptable to let the person know the topics you'd like to cover. You can maybe give them a general idea. That person or that person's representative may say, well, can you tell us what you want to ask? And just say, well, I'd like to cover this project that they're doing or this piece of legislation, but don't send your questions in advance unless you want them to take your questions and write up an official answer and then just send it back to you. And then that's not really an interview. So you really, especially with stories that I think have a personal nature, you want genuine, off the top of their head, or as they say, off the cuff responses. And also, don't be afraid to ask for what you need. If you don't understand the timeline that's happened, how one thing led to another, ask for those details. If you simply need a quote about a topic, you say, here's what I'm looking for. I need a quote on this. If you need an explanation, you ask for it. Also, always, always, always ask for the proper spelling of a name or place. If it's someone named Kristen or someone even named Joe, you might think you know how Joe is spelled, but nowadays you just don't know. So I always say, would you mind just spelling that out? Before we go any further, could you spell the name of this person's name, spell this name, spell the name of this place? You know, it just, it makes you look thorough, also saves your editor a headache. So I will go ahead and stop there. I think we'll leave a few minutes in case there's questions. I am not sure if I can't really hear questions from here. So if there's anything I can answer, I'm sure Henry and Katie will let me know. And
Do what? I think so. I want to add on one thing to Matt said, and without saying the word accuracy, he kind of hinted at that by asking and repeating questions back to the person. A little known fact about me, when I was an intern, I actually covered American Legion baseball. And as Matt was talking, I was thinking of one story I did, and I was after the game talking to the pitcher and about just the game and how well he did and everything. And I asked him what high school he went to so I can include that in the story. And he said CC. And I put down in the story Central Catholic, and the editor said he goes to Clinton Central. So never assume, always ask questions, especially when you're unfamiliar with an area. Any questions anyone has for Matt about interviewing techniques, tips?
Well, Matt, first question, can you hear
yes,
me? Perfect. So if you ask your question in the microphone, they'll hear.
Any questions on Facebook, Katie? Okay. All right, Matt, I guess you covered all the bases so well, there are no questions.
well,
Is there anything you didn't bring up that you want to bring up?
you know, just one more point, just to underscore what I said about people being sometimes anxious to talk to someone in the media. There's for whatever reason, and I don't want to get into politics, but there's a lot of distrust among people for media. Like it doesn't matter if you're with a newspaper or an organization, you know, there's just a lot of distrust in general right now. And so you know, I think it's our job again to make that person comfortable, let them know simply what you're trying to achieve with the story, you know, that you're trying, if you're just talking about an event or say veterans legislation or whatever, just let them know, you know, you're representing the American Legion, you're representing America's veterans, and you want to help tell their story, you know, put things on as good a foot as possible. And also remember for people who you're talking to, it can be scary. You might think maybe that they're nervous about what you might quote them as saying, but maybe they're worried. Often they're worried about what they're saying sounds like. And so again, it's just so important to make them comfortable. Again, start off with small talk, ask an easy question at first, just to kind of get the ball rolling. But you know, it doesn't have to be a terrifying experience for them. And I've, you know, interviewed a number of people over the years, and some of the people who can be most nervous are people who really, they don't have anything to be nervous about. I'm just asking them, share a little bit with me about what it was like serving overseas. And I think they worry that I'm doing some kind of investigative piece, and that is not the case. So just let them know, again, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to write, and that they don't have a reason to be afraid of you. So.
Did you? Matt, the question was about dress code. So if post members or auxiliary or sons is going to go interview someone, what typically should they wear?
You know, depending on the, you know, if it's an outdoor event, you know, I think often, you know, if you have something that just has some American Legion family marking on it, a polo, you want to be, I would say, a step above everybody else. I wouldn't necessarily wear a shirt and tie if it's, say, an outdoors event. If you are interviewing an official, you know, say a mayor or, you know, even a governor, a senator or representative, of course, you would want to kind of consider how they would appear, usually in a shirt and tie or other formal attire. And in that case, you would do that. Definitely wear your American Legion cap or your son's cap, or but I do recommend just, you know, consider everyone else around you and maybe try to step it up just a little bit, be a little next level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. Thank you, Matt. I'll let you get ready for the next presentation you have. And I think that the members here might have as a kind of real world experience is, you know, some of our youth programs. Your post might have an oratorical contest, or have a boys stater or a girls stater who's going on to Boys Nation or Girls Nation, and maybe you want to do a story for your post newsletter about them. They're not going to be as maybe a school, well, maybe the oratorical contest person will, but they may not be as good of a public speaker or be able to answer questions as, you know, the city mayor or someone else. So, you know, I think it's really important to put them at ease and to, you know, as you talk with them about doing a little story on them, you know, making sure they're comfortable with it. And I know you know, the more I interview people, a lot of younger kids are definitely more shy and not sure what to say, but being able to make them feel at ease and, you know, maybe even asking them questions that, like Matt said, like, not how does winning the contest make you feel? You know, you want to stay away from that, but, you know, maybe it's, you know, tell me about how you prepared for the contest, or tell me about what it means to you to, you know, be going to Boys Nation or Girls Nation, or, you know, something even about who inspires you. And they might talk about, you know, a parent or a grandparent who served and how that inspired them. So again, kind of with what Matt said, but also thinking more about especially people, especially youth program participants who may not be as experienced and willing to talk. And with that, we will go on to, we've done the interview, and I'm sorry, question?
Williams, a historian for Arkansas. I have a question. Being a retired teacher, also, what would you say the rule of thumb is for if you're interviewing kids who are under 18? And there's no parent around.
Right, that's a great question. The question is about minors and how to interview them or how to work with them. Certainly, you'd want to ask permission. You'd want to kind of, as Matt said, you'd want to identify yourself, who you are, who you're with, what you're writing a story about. If they are a youth program participant, they've kind of already bought into that about being interviewed. So I would just explain to them, this is, you know, how we, what I would do. So I've interviewed some legacy scholarship recipients, and one thing I tell them is, you know, that we want to interview them because, you know, they were a recipient, they received X number of dollars for their scholarship. And the way that they got that scholarship is because we were able to raise funds for it. And so if we tell those stories, those testimonials, then other students like them will be able to get those scholarships. So the same kind of approach to a youth program participant who may be underage. It could be talking to them about, the reason why we want to do this is, to highlight your accomplishment, but also help educate other students who might also want to participate in this program. Matt, do you have anything else you want to add to that?
You said exactly what I would have said. So.
All right. Thank you for the question, ma'am. And with that, so we've done our interviews, and now Matt's going to talk to us about how we take that and we can improve our writing.
All right, we'll jump right in to writing well. I'm going to click over to a different slideshow here. Hold on just a moment. Let me see. All right, share screen. Okay. All right, this presentation, and I really hope that I can keep it just to a half hour. Henry and Katie, thank you for holding me to it. But this is what I'm especially passionate about, is writing well, because my main job at the American Legion magazine, while I do write on occasion, I'm the managing editor, and I spend a lot of time, most of my time, hands-on with the copy, helping improve the writing of every single part of the magazine. And so the first thing I want to let you know, if you're getting ready to put pen to paper, or you're sitting down at your keyboard and you're getting ready to write a story, is think about what you're doing, what you're trying to accomplish. What is the purpose of this story? Is it to inform? Is it to persuade? What are you trying to accomplish with this piece? Are you, perhaps it's just simply a wrap up of an event. You just want to let people know how an event at the post or the district level, how it turned out. The amount of money raised. Letting people know about the Christmas party at the post and how many kids receive gifts. Or it could be something larger. So think about, what are you trying to do with the piece, and that will help give you some direction. Also consider, who is your audience? Is it the people in the post, the district, is it the department newsletter? Is it an op-ed that you're writing as an American Legion post commander, say, for your town or city newspaper? Perhaps it's a Facebook post. So who is your audience? Who's going to be reading this? Also, ask yourself, and again, this is in line with what you're trying to accomplish, why are people clicking on these stories and picking up the newsletters? What are they hoping to learn? Put yourselves in their shoes. And what can they expect from our content? What do they have a right to expect? These are the questions that I think it really helps to ask yourself and to answer for yourself. These are unpleasant truths, and I sometimes remind our staff of these things, and I have to remind myself of them quite often. Readers do not owe us their time. If we do not get their attention or keep it throughout a story, they will quit reading it. Often we will put something in print or post it online, and that's the last we really think about it. But it's out there, forever. And so people, if they aren't interested, they're going to put it down. We're not going to know about it usually, that they quit reading it. But I bet if we did know about it, we would want to know why. But at what point did I lose you? Or was the first or second paragraphs not good enough? Why couldn't I keep your interest? What was it you were expecting from that piece? Also, we are not paid by the word. A long story does not always mean that it's well written or important. And so, consider, you don't need to write 1,000 words, or maybe even 500, maybe 250 words is all you need to tell the story that needs told or give the update that needs given. And we are finding this out at the American Legion, like most print publications, our magazine. We're facing tough times with advertising and having the editorial space that we need. And so we're redesigning the magazine, and the order of the day is tight writing, clear writing, concise writing. And that doesn't necessarily mean all pieces need to be smaller, but usually they do, because we have a lot to fit in. 10 pounds of stuff into a 5-pound bag all the time. And so we have to be really good at how we approach writing a piece. It needs to be tight. We don't have a lot of room for extra stuff. So, when you sit down to write, and that's, you don't have to think of that as a bad thing. Tight writing, if you don't need extra words, don't use them. So writing tightly is not a bad thing. It's actually a very, very good thing. And this is probably one of the most unpleasant truths, but it is so important. Maybe one of the most important things in this whole presentation is grammatical errors, misspelled words, sloppy copy. Doesn't matter if that's in the American Legion magazine or a Post newsletter, it can cost you readers. You lose credibility if you get someone's title wrong, or you spell that person's name wrong, or you leave a word or two out of a sentence and suddenly it doesn't make any sense. It does reflect poorly. It just looks like no one was paying attention. And this happens, I'm not saying that to be hard on anyone. I'm saying this to myself. A couple of months ago, I'm going to be honest, we had the name of a city in the magazine and it was misspelled, and not just a letter off, it was completely wrong. And it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing to me. And we had a couple of people write in and say, I can't even, don't you even have copy editors? Readers are merciless sometimes. And so, and all I can do is just say, I'm sorry. Yes.
I think we have a question. I'm going to jump in here. Do you have a question, sir?
Yeah, Matt, I was kind of wondering about misleading titles or headline type things. Is that something we got to be careful about?
Yes. Do you have a particular example or something you're thinking of, or?
Well, I was thinking print media, they usually have something that grab your attention, but sometimes it can be very misleading. And it's one of my pet peeves.
Yeah, it is very important, I think, in how you headline a piece. The words that you use to introduce it, you need to make sure that it is not saying something that is not the case. I'm trying to come up with an example off the top of my head. I'm struggling too, but I know what you mean. You need to make sure that you're not selling a story that is not that story, or putting words in someone's mouth. And I've seen that even happen at the magazine, where I've had to say, well, actually, the person didn't say that. You have to make sure that you're not using words that they did not use when you're quoting, or even paraphrasing their quote. It is very easy to say something that was not said. I don't know. Does that answer your question a little? But yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That is very, very important, is not to be misleading, where every word matters. So.
Okay, I think you can go back to where you were. Thank you, Matt.
Okay. And I'll just skim this part really quick. The types of writing, there's expository. This is the most common, I think, that all of us use. We're just simply informing. We're not giving an opinion. Occasionally, you in your role, and I don't know what all of you, what your role is at a post or department or district. what you're doing for the Legion family, but occasionally it may be descriptive writing where you're describing a character, a place, an event, or a scene. You know, this may come into play if you're telling a veteran's story, telling about what their experience in the military was like. Descriptive writing comes in handy. Narrative writing, where you're telling a story, and you're using dialogue, description, you're relying on their memories. Also persuasive, where you are trying to influence the reader to adopt your point of view. And the American Legion publications, media may do this from time to time, where we're explaining why we support a particular piece of legislation or an initiative, you know, and we're trying to get our readers, our members to understand, you know, why do we have this policy? Why are we interested in this topic? Why does it matter? So now the 3 C's, clear, concise, consistent. We talked about this briefly, but keep these 3 C's in mind every time you go to write. Clear. Does the reader understand what you are saying and why you are saying it? Okay, read it back to yourself. Is it clear? Concise. Oh, wow. We live in the age of the short attention span. And you need to say what you're saying as briefly and directly as possible. Do not assume that the person will stick around 5 paragraphs to figure out what you're talking about. You need to take you know, what may be a lot of information and distill it, shrink it down into something bite-sized, easy to understand. And a way to do that is really just by focusing in on the most important 1 or 2 things, or the most interesting thing, and then communicating that. Also, consistency, and this is, you know, as an editor, this is near and dear to my heart. Uniformity in the use of punctuation, capitalization, titles, numbers, acronyms, abbreviations. You know, I drive people crazy here at the Legion magazine because I'm like, well, in issue whatever last year when we first mentioned this thing, you know, this title or this place, you know, this was how we treated it. So we need to make sure that we do all of it the same way every time. And so that can be kind of annoying to have someone be, you know, laser focused on consistency, but it does matter. It makes things a lot more readable and understandable if you're treating things the same way when it comes to style. And on that
Matt?
subject, yeah.
I think we have a Facebook question that Jeff is going to read.
Okay.
Jeff also wrote it. When do you think one should write in the first person?
Well, depending on the subject, you know, if you're kind of doing I think a news story, you're telling about something that's happened, I would avoid the first person. First person, I think, is reserved for maybe an op-ed, you know, a persuasive piece where you're, say, a post commander's message or a department commander's message, or you know, a personal story you're telling your experience during the military or in the military. But if you're using first person, it's going to, no matter what, it's going to come off as, you know, an opinion piece. And you need to remember that you're, you know, in a way representing the American Legion. So whatever you're saying first person, somebody may think that's what the American Legion is saying. So I would be careful about when and where I used first person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
In-
A word about American Legion style.
Hey, Matt,
Oh,
we have
yeah.
another comment. Just a second.
Oh,
I
sure.
was going to make a comment about first person. In our department publication, the commander will
have a column, or the NEC man or the DSO, they'll contribute to, so, the copy is not in first person, but the contributors do write in first person. And so then I edit them to stay within our, consistency and style and, grammar and all that. But, it comes off as a column in the paper and on our website that way too. So I suppose, does that sound like a sound answer for when to use first person when it's a contributor in a way?
Yes, I guess without seeing it, it's kind of hard to say, what I would definitely say about it. But first person can be a great way to communicate. I guess just, it depends on, what the content is. Sometimes first person is ideal, but other times, third person, especially if you're just trying to talk about an issue or an event, third person is more the way to go.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In the news parts, but I think it would be, I guess I'm saying is it would be difficult to, every year you have a new commander and you have to train them to write in third person, and then you get a new one, you have to train them to write differently, so for the sake of a contributor, it's often easier to just allow them to be in the first person format and then present it as a column or, a correspondent, kind of like you see in newspapers every day, so.
And I think it's also how we treat the national commander in the magazine, where every month the commander has a message that is about maybe a program or an initiative that we're doing at the national level. But if we were to cover news of the commander's trip through Europe or another event he was on, we would write it as a news story. So there's kind of that difference between the opinion or the commentary, the first person, and an event that happened that's related to, in this case, the same individual.
Yeah, and there may be times where, you may, depending on what the person is writing first person about, if it is, say, a persuasive piece or opinion, always keep in mind, the American Legion being nonpartisan, and you may need a statement on there, just, this piece doesn't necessarily reflect the views of the American Legion, that sort of thing. So I guess that's, maybe I'm talking about something totally different, but sometimes with first person, just, it's good to be especially careful and make sure that it's not looking like the person is speaking for the American Legion at large. It depends on really what the article is. Every single one is different. So. Okay, am I good to go back to the slide?
Yep. Yeah. Excuse me. Yep. You're good, Matt.
Okay. Just a brief word about American Legion style, and I could go on and on about this. But we really rely on two things: the AP style book, which I think is a very convenient, easy to understand resource, and got guardrails really for just grammar, punctuation, titles, when to capitalize, how to handle numbers, all in a very consistent way. We also have what's called the American Legion Publication Style Guide, which I put together a few years ago. And you can find that at legion.org/publications. It's a small need of an update, but really what it does is it pulls out from the AP style book the things that are most relevant to us at the American Legion, and it also explains where we differ. And there are a few places where we do not follow AP style. For instance, they would lowercase the in the American Legion. We do not, because that is our organization's name. It has a capital T, the American Legion. However, and this is something that I see, and I correct it in the magazine all the time, and among the divisions, even at headquarters, people will capitalize the for the American Legion writers or the American Legion baseball program. And in those cases, the is not capitalized because it is not part of a title. You're talking about the writers, the baseball program, so it would be a lowercase t. I could rabbit trail into that, but I'm going to go back to, I'm going to stay focused on just writing well here. Leads. A lead is your first sentence or paragraph. Sometimes, depending on what you're talking about, a creative lead is in order. It could be, I use the example of a Boston research group, and they're seeking brain donations for research. You could be creative with that. Other times, the subject matter is extremely serious. Veterans are dying, waiting for VA appointments, and you don't want to make light of that or seem flippant. So, you know, there's times for a creative introduction and times you just want to get straight to it. Also, find your hook. You know, there's the 5 W's and an H, as we call them: the who, what, when, where, why, and how. So what's important, what's new, what's different? Those are things that you want to use to drive the story. Why are you telling the story in the first place? Probably because there's something that people don't know and you want to tell them. Also, be succinct. As Mark Twain said, don't use a $5 word when a 50-cent word will do. In the magazine, I often scratch out assistance and just write help, or I scratch out attempt and write try. Numerous, many. You know, there's just, you know, use simple, plain language. Also, write in the active voice that tells what a person or a thing is doing. Passive is telling what is done to someone or something. So I give a couple of examples here. Thousands of tourists view the Grand Canyon every year, as opposed to the Grand Canyon is viewed by thousands every year. So you can see the difference in those two sentences and why one just reads better. Putting attribution second, always put your key information up first and then say who said it. And also be short and punchy. Make readers wonder where you're going, you know. Don't make sentences too long. Relevant statistics. Statistics are, people are always looking for a really shocking or eye-opening number. Starting with the story, you can draw readers in by using others' experiences and telling them. That's a great way to open a story and keep people going with it, is telling what someone has experienced, helping them see through someone else's eyes. Don't make your readers work too hard. You can be creative, but don't string them along. Don't, as they call it, bury the lead. Get to it pretty quickly. So also don't put too much in your introduction. Sometimes I've seen people try to put all 5 W's and an H in there. And so that's an awful lot. You can kind of sprinkle it through a couple of paragraphs. Avoid there is and there are. That's kind of boring. Try to avoid those phrases. And I also, and I don't know that we'll get to this, but at the end of the slideshow here, I have a list of cliches, things, useless words, redundant words, things like that you see a lot, you probably should avoid. I'm going to pause for a second and say, Henry, Katie, I know we're a little bit over on time. Just if I need to wrap it up, let me know.
Why don't you just keep going through what you have, and we'll just keep going from here.
Okay. Another thing, don't state the obvious. I actually read the sentence somewhere. The internet provides an immense source of useful information. We know that. We don't need to read it. Don't cite the dictionary. I go back sometimes. My mom saved all my school papers as a kid, and in a couple of papers, I did what all the other 8th graders do. Merriam-Webster defines marketing as, you know, you don't need to define words. That's what the dictionary is for. And this one, oh man, you know, everyone in the office knows how I feel about this. Do not ever say, imagine a world where, or imagine this, imagine that, like, don't use that as your lead. Don't use it anywhere in your story. Don't ask people to imagine anything. It's kind of a lazy phrase, a lazy form of writing. Just, I don't recommend it. I've even seen it in the New York Times, and I about tore my hair out. So a word about quotes. Develop an ear for good quotes, worthy quotes. Listen for unique phrases or things said in a way that you haven't heard before. You want heartfelt quotes. You want thoughtful, unrehearsed, honest. And I've got a couple of American Legion magazines out in front of me. And, you know, if you saw our July issue, we had a piece on the Afghan interpreters. And, you know, right up in the first paragraph of the story, we quote one of the interpreters as saying, you know, I lost all hope. I was sleepless. I thought the Taliban will find me and behead me. You know, that is a good quote. You know, that is honest. It's eye-opening. That's the sort of stuff that you want. That said, learn how to paraphrase. Not everything needs a quotation. Somebody might say, they might tell you, well, about, you know, half of our members live on this side of town, or half of our members are Vietnam veterans. You don't need to put that in quotes. You can just say it. You know, half the post members are Vietnam veterans. You just save the quote marks for emotions, opinions, unique expressions from your sources. Also, don't summarize the quote before you give it. An example might be Smith said she joined the Legion because she missed the camaraderie she enjoyed in the military. And then the quote is, I miss the friendships I had in the Air Force. Well, you're kind of stealing the power of her quote by saying what she is saying. So just let her say it, and you don't need to say anything about it. I avoid transitions, like when asked about, you know, that's just kind of cluttering it up with writing that you don't need. I avoid stacking quotes as well. I do like quotes, but you know, there's always that temptation to cram as much in as you can. And you know, you talk to 5 people and you feel like they might be mad if you don't quote every single one of them. You know, don't tie yourself down with that. Don't feel like you need to put too many quotes in, and especially don't stack them. Give your story some room, you know, have a couple of paragraphs just talking about other aspects of things, and then put a quote in. Only put a quote in. What I'm saying is only put a quote in when it really is good and really helps move the story along. So a couple of other pieces of advice. I wouldn't rely on a formula for writing stories. It's good to maybe say use the inverted pyramid if you're doing a news piece, but you don't need to stick to the same way of telling a story every time. But you should have a structure. Your story should kind of be constructed well. You know, quote upon information upon quote upon information. So you do need organization. But again, don't shoehorn in everything that you've collected. Just use the best. It's like they say about movies, a lot hits the cutting room floor. Nobody needs your director's cut of a story. You know, chances are the tighter you write it, that's really all that you needed to write. If it's truly important, put it in there, but don't feel like every detail that you gathered or observed or collected has to be put in there. So avoiding Legionese, that goes back to thinking about your audience. If somebody outside the Legion, chances are somebody's going to see the piece who is not a member of the American Legion family, and they may not understand some of our terminology there. So when you can, just speak plainly. And this is extremely important. Anticipate reader questions. What may be obvious to you because you're familiar with all of this, you've collected the information, you've done the interviews, you're so deep into the story that you kind of subconsciously forget that everyone else doesn't know as much as you do. So you need to ask yourself, well, I put this bit of information in there, but ooh, do I need to explain it? Will the person understand even what that is? I know, but does the reader know? So avoiding boilerplate text. It's really easy to copy and paste text from a website, and I'm not saying plagiarism, but it's very easy to borrow an organization's way of how they describing their mission or things like that from another source. So avoid just kind of if they're giving you a phrase or a term, take it, look at it, turn it around, see, if it makes sense. Don't just use language other people are giving you just because you need to write quickly. Avoid regurgitating phrases and words. Things like, I hear these a lot: culture of growth, the time is now, giving back. I hear giving back a lot, but what does that really mean? Are we saying these things so much now that those phrases don't really have meaning anymore? I kind of think so. So if readers have heard it before, don't use it, or at least try to find another way of saying it. Also, do not pad stories with quotes just to make them longer. Again, not every person you interview will make the cut, and that is okay. You don't need to feel bad about it. I will close with just a quick scan of some what I consider useless words that it's always tempting to put these into a story. And maybe it's because we say these words and when we're talking with one another. And so they tend to show up in our copy as well, but they really don't help and they really don't mean anything. In fact, I'm using the word really as I'm speaking right now, which I really don't need to do. So things like a little, absolutely, basically, kind of, maybe, really, very. Look at every word you're using and just scratch some of these out. You don't need them. They're not telling the story. They are not imperative. Cliches. These are some of my favorite cliches. Anything 2.0. No, we're on to 3.0 or 4.0. We don't need 2.0 anything. As a nation, at a crossroads, at the end of the day, begs the question. I mean, I can't help but laugh. I mean, because you see some of these so often, but if you think about it, we've said them so often that they don't mean anything. Game changer. I've heard it so many times now. It's not changing any game. It's so in a nutshell. Let's see some more. More often than not, outside the box, raised questions, remains to be seen, underscores, tapped, sparked debate, slated. Slated's one of my least favorite. And okay, I'm going to say this one. I don't have it on the list because even typing the word makes me angry. The word impacted. Okay. Well, the first thing when I hear the word impacted that I think of is just, oh, that person was impacted. That sounds really painful. So I feel like impact has lost all impact. So that's another one that I would avoid. Redundant words. Absolutely certain, added bonus, crisis situation, end result, few in number, merge together, might possibly, unexpected surprise. So if you would like to have a list of these, I am happy to email them to you and you can use them as a quick reference beside your computer when you go to write. But I'm not listing these saying that I do not use them on occasion. I have to take them out of my own copy. I am not immune to the temptation of putting some of these redundant words and phrases in, useless words, cliches. Very easy to do.
Matt, may I add one phrase to the list that I would love everybody to help me get rid of is win-win situation.
Yes,
Can't stand
thank
that
you. Thank you. Yes, win-win situation. It is not a win. Okay, well, that's my list. It's not comprehensive. I have a lot more, but those are some of my most / least favorites that I thought I would share with all of you. I hope that this has been beneficial. I know this ran a few minutes over. There's a lot more that can be said just about Legion style, but I'm at the magazine. I'm always happy to you feel free to email me, give me a call if there's something you have a question about when it comes to style or writing or editing. I love to talk about it. Some of my favorite subjects. So.
Matt, thank you so much. This was very helpful, and I'm glad you were able to join us today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Henry. And again, thank all of you so much for attending, and we wish you well, and always reach out if we can be of any assistance to you in what you do. We are here to serve you.
All right. Thank you, Matt.